Today what I want to do is finish up time value of money. I want to show you a spreadsheet I built using only the formulas we've talked about so far in this class, just to show you, even though it's not a real advanced spreadsheet, it looks pretty advanced, and it does some pretty sophisticated stuff using very basic formulas. And then there's an article I have out there on Blackboard. It's about the power of compounding. It's a pretty old article, but it's still pretty timeless. It's just as current today as it was back then. And so I want to take that article, not do all of the examples. If you want to go through and see if you can work the other examples and get their numbers, that'd be great practice. I want to take a few of their examples in that article and actually work them using the formulas we've talked about. And so that'll finish up our time value of money. And then we might get a little bit into cost benefit analysis. What I want to do with cost benefit analysis is a little unusual. I usually start with the class notes and then go to the Excel applications, but I think on cost benefit analysis, since we've been talking about time value money, you remember at the beginning of time value money, I gave you the notes first and I said, trust me, when we get to the Excel applications, it'll make more sense. And hopefully that was the case. Cost benefit analysis, I'm going to just reverse it. I'm going to show you the actual application of the theory and then go back and look at the class notes. And I think, especially on cost benefit analysis, because it really is just an example of time value money, and it makes more sense just to do a cost benefit analysis. And I'll do one of the Excel applications, and then you can see how it works. And then when we get to the notes, you'll have that context to be able to put it in perspective. So here's a spreadsheet. It's out there on Blackboard. It's a retirement planning spreadsheet, and it's not a real sophisticated one because it somewhat ignores taxes. It ignores Social Security, and there's a few issues with it, but it's a pretty basic spreadsheet. What you do is you put your assumptions in here. I call it the Carol file just because when I first did it, I had the person's name and I called the person Carol, probably because I was working with someone named Carol in their retirement. I've done a lot of pro bono retirement planning. And just to keep it really simple, let's say she thinks she can make 5% a year on her investments. She thinks inflation will be 2%. So why is that important? Well, that's important because when she retires, she can't just have a fixed income for the rest of her life. She needs an income that increases with inflation. So we're trying to build a retirement plan for this lady named Carol. She's 25 today. She wants to retire at 62, and she thinks she'll die at 95. So from 62 to 95, she's going to be living off a portfolio that's going to be paying her expenses, but she expects her expenses to grow with inflation during her retirement years. And then the one question I ask people when retiring is, hey, if you were to retire today, what would be your budget? And that's something I really encourage you to do. If you don't do, we're doing these Excel applications. If you're not real familiar with Excel, learn Excel through these applications. And I strongly recommend you start building a personal budget. One of the reasons I felt so comfortable retiring at the age of 46 is I've been keeping a budget since I graduated from college. So I had a 20-year budget. I knew exactly where I spent my money. And so I was very comfortable retiring because I knew exactly where I was spending my money. I could plan. I knew what was coming up. I knew what my emergency items were, replacing an air conditioner or those kind of things. I saw those expenses come up, car expenses, how much I spent on groceries. So she's done that. Or I sat down. I have had to sit down with some people and just help them build a budget from scratch. She sat down and she figured out, if I could make $40,000 a year. Now she might have said, you know what, I need $75,000 a year, but Social Security is going to provide some of that. And she might have done some other math just to figure out this might be net of tax. Who knows how she brought in Social Security and other retirement plans. And I've got like 3 different retirement plans that fund my retirement. Social Security, my pension plan. I've got an executive pension plan. I got a few things. Got a UTSA plan. So I've got all this stuff. I'm trying to figure out different pieces of it. So I don't have to fund my entire expenses. Some of that's going to come from other sources. So maybe she took that all in consideration when she came up with this 40,000. But again, it's a fairly simplistic analysis. So let's look at this graphically. So what Carol's trying to do is she's at age 25 today, and she wants to accumulate an investment portfolio so when she turns 62, that will pay out enough income so that she can make it to age 95. All right. So we'll come up with this number. This is number trying to figure out how much does she need to invest every month. We'll figure that out. We'll see if we still get 1360 with our assumptions. She's going to invest that at every month for 5%. We'll see in the spreadsheet that's going to accumulate, and we'll come back to these numbers, to $1,741,000 at age 72. And when she does that, this 40,000 that she would need today actually becomes 83,000 when she turns 62 because of inflation. So she can't have an income of 40,000 when she turns 62 because I won't buy nearly as much. Because of inflation, she actually needs more than twice as much. And this 83,000 that she needs a year, that is going to grow with inflation. So we need a portfolio. Hopefully this 1,741,470 is a large enough portfolio so that if she starts drawing $83,000 in the first year and that plus 2% the second year and the third year more, 2% more, that when she turns 95, when she thinks she'll die, she'll have a portfolio that's right at zero. All right, so that's the goal in all of this. So I set this up. I did it a couple of ways, just so you could walk through this. So you have the spreadsheet. One, I use the text function. With the text function, you can type text and then embed it with formulas. So this one has the function. So you see that 40,000. If I were to change that to 50,000, it automatically updates the formulas. So I'm going to leave it at 40,000 because that's what our PowerPoint shows. So 40,000. The other way you can do it is what's called concatenate. So you can use the text function or use concatenate. With concatenate, when you need dollars, you just put a comma after your text. You reference whatever cell you want to reference. And so here I'm going to that cell, A5 on the calc page. And so here you can see I'll put the age 62. If I change this to 65, just watch right here, the 62 will change to 65, and then this formula that takes 95 minus the 65, all that updates. So if she retires at age 65, she's retiring, well, in how many years she'll retire? She's 25 today, so she retires at 65. She's retiring in 40 years. All right. So I kind of like this. It's a good way to train. So if you need to train someone on something, you can build a spreadsheet and then you can actually put text with formulas combined together so that as they change numbers, they'll see it update in here. So this just explains what we're going to do. The client, I'll call her Carol again. She thinks if she were to retire today, she would need $40,000 today to meet all of her expenses. She's going to save on a monthly basis. She's going to save at the end of every month. And she wants to retire at 62, which is 37 years from now. So she has 37 years to build a portfolio. We're ignoring taxes. We assume she doesn't have any other savings. This is her entire savings. We're ignoring Social Security. So the question is, how much does she need to invest every month so she can retire at age 62? So the first thing we need to figure out is how much income will she need at age 62 to provide all of her expenses. All right. So again, I don't know why I switch between concatenate and others. In this dollar function here, it just tells you what format you want. I have to look these things up. I can never remember the actual what you have to type. But if you want it in dollars and cents, then you use the word dollar. So at the end of your text, you do comma and then you do dollars so that it knows you want a formula, and you say, I want to bring in B9, but I want it as dollars, but I don't want any decimal places. So you can see how that works. So it just brings in different things here. I'm bringing in a number and then I'm making it a percent, but I'm doing that actually in the text. So you have to kind of play around with it. It takes a while to get used to it. But again, it says, okay, today she needs, if she retired today, she would need, sorry, I got lost here. Let's find it. Step one. She retired today, she would need 40,000, but she expects 2% inflation over the next 37 years. So she'll need $40,000, but $40,000 inflated at 2% for 37 years, just like we did in that second Excel application exercise where the guy wanted to buy a car, but he wanted to buy it in 5 years. It costs X dollars a day, but he's expecting inflation in car prices. I don't know if you remember we did that. And remember, with inflation, we don't divide by 12 and multiply the time by 12. Inflation, we just always do on an annual basis. So it's 40,000 today, but times 1 plus our inflation rate, 2%, raised to 37 years. That gives us, remember, that 83,200 that I showed you. Here I'm using the round function. So I'm rounding to the nearest $100. The reason I use the round function with these things, it does mess up things a little bit when it comes to just showing how accurate or how close we get in the final answer. We'll be off a few $100 because I'm rounding. I like to round because I when I'm talking to people, especially people in retail, I don't like using numbers that go out several decimal places like I have this precision. These are all ballpark figures. I don't know if inflation is going to be 2%. It might be 1.93. It might be 2.3. It might be 1.5467. 2% is just my guess. The chances of it being exactly 2% is pretty low. And if it's 1.98 instead of 2, that's going to give me a pretty different number. It might give me 81,300 or something. So it's pretty material. So I round just so I don't imply a precision that's not there. The next thing we're going to do is figure out if we start at age 62 with 83,000 and that's going to grow with inflation, how much a portfolio do we need at age 62 to fund all of that? So we need $83,000 and we need it for 33 years, right? She retires at 62. She's going to live to 95. That's 33 years. It's going to grow at 2% and her portfolio is going to make 5%. So how do we handle that? So I'm going to show you a little trick here that's pretty cool. You've got a cash flow that's growing at a constant rate of 2% and you're going to discount it at 5%. So that's kind of complicated because you've got multiple cash flows, right? You got 83,000 and you got 83,000 plus 2%. Then you got 83,000 plus 2% plus another 2%. What we can do in finance, and it's really, really cool, instead of doing have to forecast all those cash flows out, and you could do that. You could sit down and forecast the 83,000 out every year. We're actually going to do that. We do the cost benefit analysis. We're actually going to calculate each year. But here we don't want to do that because it's 33 years. And so instead of forecasting all that out and then discounting all back at 5%, we can do a really simple thing is we just take $83,000. Instead of discounting it at 5%, we discount it at 5% minus the growth rate in those cash flows. So instead of discounting it at 5%, we'll discount it at 3% because our inflation rate is 2. And it's pretty cool that that works. Now we're doing this on a monthly basis. And so that 3% divided by 12 is 0.25%. So we're actually going to use 0.25%, and instead of 33 years, we're going to take 33 years times 12 months, and we have 396 months. So for inflation, we do things on an annual basis, but anytime we're dealing with an investment portfolio, I like to do things monthly because she's going to have monthly income coming out. And so here we're going to say that 83,000 growing with inflation over the 33 years, what's its value today? We'll use the present value interest factor of annuity, remember that. But instead of doing 5% divided by 12, we're going to do 3% divided by 12 because that 83,000 is going to grow with inflation. And so what does that mean? Well, you multiply all of that out. The present value of that retirement income, so the $83,000 divided by 12, or dividing by 12, you multiply by 251. It means that when she turns 62, she needs to have a portfolio of $1,741,470. $1,741,470. I don't know if I didn't do much rounding on that one, but so this 6933, that's just that $83,000 divided by 12, and that times 251, 158, that just tells you what that monthly income when you turn 62, growing at inflation, what the present value of that is at age 62. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is figure out how much does she need to invest. She knows at 62, when she turns 62, she needs $1,741,000. So the future value is $1,741,000. So here we're going to do it. We want to know how much she wants to save. Well, she's going to invest at 5%, but she's going to invest monthly, so that's 0.4167% monthly. And she's going to retire in 37 years, so 37 times 12 is 444 months. So she'll make 0.4167% a month, and she's going to invest for 444 months. So that gives you a future value interest factor of 1 to 80. So what do? Well, we just say take the future value divided by the factor, and that means she needs to invest $1,360 a month. So let's come back to here. If she invests $1,360 a month for 444 months, boy, is that depressing or exciting that if you retire at 62, you'll be working 444 months. But 444 months, and she earns 5%. That will get her portfolio of $1,741,470. If she then stops investing and starts taking out money, in the first year she takes out about $83,000. Again, we converted this to a monthly basis, and that monthly income grows at an inflation rate of 2% divided by 12. So every month it grows. She should run out of money at age 95. Now, does it work? So I have this page that says test calculations. So age 25, month 1, she starts with a portfolio 0. This should look fairly familiar. She earns nothing because she invests at the end of the month. She invests $1,360 in a month, so her ending portfolio is $1,360. The only thing I added from what we did from the Excel applications is I added a column for money she takes out, because we didn't have that in the portfolios we were working with. The next month, she starts with $1,360. She makes $5.67. What? How does she get that? Well, it's the beginning balance times that 0.41% she's making a month. She invests another $1,360. So at the end of 2 months, she's got $2,700. This goes along for a while. When she turns 30, during her 30th year, after her 30th birthday, she'll hit $100,000. I remember the first time my portfolio hit $100,000, I thought, wow, I'm rich. That's a lot of money. And then you realize it's not all that much. She goes around for a while, and then it gets kind of exciting at age 43. She's got $500,000. And then it gets real exciting when she turns 53. She's a millionaire, depending on how you define millionaire. Some people define millionaire as your net worth is $1 million. Some people define millionaire is that your income's $1 million. So her net worth is $1 million. Who knows what her income is? She keeps investing. What you notice here is she's investing $1,360, but she's actually making, 3 times that in income. So here she's earning more than she's actually contributing. That goes on for a while. Remember, at age 62, at the end of age 61, she wanted to have $1,741,000. She has almost that. There's, again, some little rounding numbers. And then she retires and she starts taking $69.33. What is $69.33? That's the $83,000 we said she needed. The $83,000, remember, is the future value of the $40,000 she needed at age 25. So here she'll start taking money out. Well, at the beginning, it's pretty good. She's earning more than she's taking out. So it makes it seem like, wow, this can go on forever. However, what she's taking out is going to be growing. So at some point, they'll cross, and we'll see. You can see right in here, they're starting to cross, right? Right here at age 64, what she's taking out is greater than what she's earning, but it's not much. Boy, it's just, well, actually, there it's not. So here, age 64, month 7, she's taking out a little bit more than she's earning. So here her portfolio is actually going to start declining. Up to there, it was growing. Now it starts declining. You think, well, this is going to last forever because it's not declining much. But after a while, it starts declining much faster than what it's growing, and then it really goes fast. So she goes along, and her portfolio is dropping. But it doesn't drop to $1 million until she's in her late 80s. So she's thinking, wow, in my 80s, I got $1 million left. I only need to make it to age 95. But at this point, it starts dropping really fast. And you get all the way out. Remember, so you want to retire at age 95. At age 95, right, she made it a little bit. She made it to 94 and about halfway through a month at age 95. So she, because of all that rounding, she made it slightly further than her 95th birthday. So what does she do with this? Well, if she's in really good health back here at age 94, she's got a problem. This is what we call longevity risk. Longevity risk is the risk that you outlive your portfolio. You live too long. So she's got an issue. What I tell students somewhat jokingly, but there's a little bit of truth to it. Probably not even 94, somewhere around 93. She's in good health. She needs to find something that's really dangerous, really fun, and doesn't cost much money. Something that's going to shorten her life, but she's really going to enjoy it. So, sometimes I joke that she should become a heroin addict because, that might be a lot of fun. I don't know. I don't use drugs, so doesn't sound all that fun to me. But just the jokes I hear on sitcoms. But the problem with that is that's pretty expensive. So who knows? In 60-something years, drugs might be legal, so maybe it won't be all that expensive. She could do bungee jumping or skydiving, but that's pretty expensive as well. So she's got to find something that's a lot of fun, that's probably going to shorten her life, but doesn't cost her much because she doesn't have much money to deal with. Now, in my life insurance class, I talk about something she can do to actually eliminate longevity risk. There's actually products that you can buy. So there are things she could have done which would have reduced her portfolio a little bit, but it would have extended how long her portfolio would have helped her out. So she could have actually used an insurance product. So the answer to this is she doesn't have to do exactly this. The goal is she turns 62 and she's got $1.7 million. There's a lot of things she can do here. She could take some of it and put it into what's called an immediate annuity, or she could put it into a longevity product. I actually recommend she do a longevity product early in her life. So she takes some of this portfolio and she actually invests it in a longevity product. What a longevity product does is if you don't live a long time, you lose all of it. But if you make it to 90 or 95, it pays you $1 million. So it pays you to live. So if you die at 85 and you invested, say, $10,000 when you were 40, that $10,000, you lose all of it. But if you make it 85, that $10,000 becomes $1 million and you get $1 million. So there's things you can do to manage longevity risk. We won't talk about it in this class. I go into detail about it in my life insurance class. It's pretty cool products. The insurance industry doesn't sell much of it. You have to really look around for it. But they do have products like that. She might have a Social Security. Social Security can keep paying no matter how long she lives. And if she has this really good portfolio, one thing with Social Security is she could wait to start drawing on her Social Security until she turns 70. And if she does that, her Social Security would be much, much, much higher than it would be if she started drawing down on it at 62. So there's definite things she can do. So the key here, she just needs to know how much she needs to invest every month. Once she's got that answered, once she hits retirement age, then she can sit back and figure out, okay, what do I need to change? Now, there's a few issues with this. First of all, she's probably not going to invest $1,360 every month because she probably can't afford it when she's 25. So the one thing that's not in here is she'll probably start investing maybe $500 a month, and that investment amount's going to grow as her salary goes up. I didn't incorporate that in there, but that would make a lot more sense, that her investment amount would grow every year as her salary grows. So she might start off $500 a month, and then $700 a month, and $800, then $1,000. I didn't put that in there, so that's not captured at all. So that's probably the biggest thing. I could have incorporated that, but we don't really have a formula that helps us with that. It's a little tricky. It works with the present value function. If you take a present value and you discount the 5% minus the growth rate, that works. We don't have something comparable to that. You can't just take the investment rate plus the inflation rate to get the future value to work. It doesn't quite work. So it's a little challenging there. So that's probably the biggest thing that doesn't make sense here. The other thing is she can make adjustments as she goes. So if she invests, she'll probably invest pretty heavily in stocks at age 25, but as she gets into her 50s, late 40s, early 50s, she'll probably be cutting back on how much she invests in the stocks. So this investment rate, the investment rate itself is probably going to change over time. And the other thing that's really important is the path that the investment market takes. So you're hoping the market crashes early in your career so you can buy stocks and bonds really cheap. The worst case is those people who retired in 2007, and then the market crashed when they were in 2008 and 2009. That's the worst case, is the market crashes right before you retire. So she might get to age 62 and she finds instead of making 5%, she only made 4.2%. In that case, she may have to adjust and she may just have to work to age 65. That's been my advice to some people that I've worked with who did not do a good job in investing for retirement. And the only solution we could come up with is you're going to have to work to age 70. Now, there's one lady I was working with in very good health, and she didn't want to work longer, and so her solution is, well, I'll just not live very long. And you can't really control that. How long you live is not something. So if you're healthy, you're going to live longer. You're going to want to live. Life is wonderful. She's got grandkids. So my solution was she'll just have to work more years, and she just did not want to do that. She wanted to retire early and get out of that job that she didn't enjoy that much. So that's the other solution, is make sure you're in a career that you really enjoy, so that if you do have to work a few more years. I was hoping to retire at age 40, and then I saw my parents' retirement, and it wasn't very well done. So I worked another 6 years for my parents' retirement. So I worked 20 years or 15 years for my retirement, and then I worked another 6 years for my parents' retirement. So there's other factors in there. Your parents might be really wealthy, and they may be leaving you a big inheritance, and that could be part of your retirement plan as well. So there's all these different things going on, and who knows what future Congresses are going to do with tax laws and everything else. Yeah, sure, you're going to invest in a Roth IRA, which is going to protect you from future taxes, but there's nothing that keeps future Congresses from taxing things that they tell you they're not going to tax you today. Today they say it's tax-free, but it'd be taxable in the future. Social Security used to be tax-free, and now it's taxable. So there's a lot of factors. So what we're doing is just trying to get a ballpark of what you might need to do. Now this spreadsheet, it's out there on Blackboard. And it actually has all the functions I use are on this one page. There's not that many of them. And you'll see formulas very similar to what we did. Like here, we had the number of years until she retires times 12. Remember, we did that when we were coming up with our N. Some of these I'm just taking a percent and adjusting it so it's not a percent, so it fits into my text function. But here's the present value interest factor formula. Remember, you type that in your Excel model. So there's the future value function. That's the exact same. I'm using the round function, which is fine, just so it doesn't get so many decimal places. So I like to use the round function. The round function here, I wanted to round it to the nearest dollar. You can round it to the nearest $100. Like here, I rounded it to the nearest $100 by doing round and then comma -2. -2 means you want to go to the nearest $100. Comma 2 means you want to go out 2 decimal places. If you want to go to the nearest 1,000, you would do comma -3. So everything we've learned in this class, if you think, wow, this spreadsheet's kind of complex, if you're a finance major, I'd recommend you start building stuff like this and putting it out there on LinkedIn. If you're an accounting major, you're a marketing major, management major, get into Excel and build models to practice with these formulas, the formulas we just learned, and see what you can build. Now, the next thing I want to do is, it's this Babson staff letter. I actually got a book that has all of their staff letters. I always love their staff letters. This is a portfolio manager who would write an article. I used to do these articles at UTSA. We'd publish them on our website. They would actually mail these out. We never invested with Babson. They're a famous firm, David Babson. Probably still in business, probably managing a few $1 billion. I don't know. I haven't checked in with them in a while. This article was written by someone named Everett. Some of their articles were very specific to something going on in the news right at that time. This one was more, this is one of their very timeless articles. It's 15, 16 years old, but it works just as well today. I'd recommend you go read this article. It's only 4 pages. And I have these numbered items. And what these numbered items are present value and future value examples that they give. I want to work a couple of them. Some of them are, especially this Ben Franklin one, I really like it. It's a really interesting one. So, but you should look at them. He talks about compounded interest and how powerful that is. He also talks about the opposite side of that, which is the decompounding of interest. And once you start spending your money, and we saw that with Carol, once she started taking money out, at first it didn't hurt her very much, but at some point you saw it just drop off dramatically. And so he talks about that. So there's actually 7 examples here, and they're all numbered in the document. And if you want to try them and see if you can actually do them doing the formulas we did in class, you could certainly do that. Remember in the class notes, at the very end of the class notes, I talked about the 4 formulas that we need. The formulas we use on exam 2. This first one, a future value discounted to the day, 1 future value. Remember we said we hardly ever use this one. The present value equals the payment times the present value interest factor annuity. Remember we used this to figure out a loan amount. We knew how much the car cost. That's how much we were going to borrow. We had the factor. We just want to know what our payments were. We used that one. The future value, we just used, we did this one with Carol. Remember, she needed $83,000 at age 62. She needed that until she died at age 95. We want to know what the present value of that is because that's how much money we were going to need to save. The future value, that is, we know what we need to save. Carol needed $1,741,000. We know, well, I'm sorry, this is down here. So Carol needed $1,741,000. We know what the future value interest factor was. We just need to know how much you need to invest every month. So that was $1,360, if I remember that correctly. So we use that function. And in here, we also use this with Carol, that she needed $40,000 today to live on, but with inflation, that was going to turn into $83,000 when she turned 62. So you need to inflate something. So we've used 3 of these functions in the Carol file. We did not use this function at all. This is probably the least used function of all of them, but we use these others quite a bit. So just using these functions, can we do this Babson newsletter article? So I've got a few of these. This first one, so it's Homer said $1,000 invested at 8% per year for just 400 years would amount to $23 quadrillion, or roughly 3.7 million for every man, woman, and child alive in the world today. This was Sidney Homer, not the author of the Iliad or Homer Simpson. So I actually had students actually go out and calculate this to get the 3.7 million. You'd have to go back and figure out the population of the world back in 2004 when he wrote this. So he wrote this in 2004. So let's see if we can figure this out. All right. $1,000 invested at 8% for a year. He's not saying you have $1,000 that you invest $1,000 every year for 400 years. He's saying you invest $1,000 today and you're going to invest it at 8%. So remember this, we're going to say the future value equals the present value times 1 plus our rate. I use an I for that, raised to our n. So we're going to say $1,000 times, and what is our rate? 1 plus 0.08. What is our n? 400 years. And you put that amount in there, and you get 23. I don't know if that's a quadrillion or not, but there's hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions. So maybe that is quadrillion comes next. 23. I don't know what the world population was back then, but somewhere around 6.3 billion people. Wow, there's something wrong with my math here, or something wrong with his math. He has some math errors in a couple of his. So that's 3.7, 3,700,000. So this one he had right. There's a later one I'll show you that he actually has a math error. Here I had a math error. So at the time he wrote this, there were about 6.3 billion people in the world. And so you take that 23 quadrillion divided by the population, you get $3.7 million per person. Now, why didn't someone back 400 years ago invest $1,000? So first of all, if this were true and we had inflation, that $1,000 400 years ago would be like billions of dollars today. So that would have been a lot of money. Our currencies would have depreciated. You know, there's a lot of things going on. Now, it's interesting, for a lot of years, there was almost no inflation in the world. And we know that because you go back and read books written back hundreds of years ago, and a book written 1 century versus the next century, they use almost the exact same dollar amounts for how much a piece of bread costs, how much a cup of wine costs. So we went, you know, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, where there was really no inflation in the world. Inflation is really an industrial revolution concept. And so if there's no inflation, investment returns would have been very, very low as well. And so instead of making 8%, you're more likely to make 1%, and that makes a big difference. You change this from 8% to just 1%, and that would only be worth $53,000. Isn't that amazing? The difference between making 8% a year for 400 years and making 1% for 400 years is incredibly small. And so here, how much is that per person? It's not even a penny per person. So it makes a big difference. That's why we talk about it. It's not just you got to invest early and compound. You got to invest early and you got to take some risk. So 8% is actually a really high return, even today's terms. I think stocks are probably priced to make the 6 to 7% return, and that makes a big difference. 6% versus 8%. Boy, that makes a huge difference. So instead of that being $3.7 million per person, it's only going to be about $2,000. It's still impressive that you could save at 6% $1,000, and 400 years later you could give everybody in the world $2,000. But 6% is going to give you a much smaller return than 8%. So it's really material. Now, you don't have 400 years, but you do have 40, 30, 40, 50 years. It makes a big difference over 30, 40, 50 years as well. All right, so there's the first one, just basic compounding. Now, this next one's a little bit more involved. I really like this problem. The mathematicians in the class, you know, we've got some marketing majors and we have an actuarial science major. They can probably use a quadratic formula to figure this out, but I could figure it out using quadratic formulas, but I have to go look it up to be able to do it. But here, and this is just shows you just how brilliant Benjamin Franklin was, a very smart man. So he left $5,000. So we're going to say times 0. He left $5,000. And he put some rules. He left it to each to 2 cities. So he left $10,000, but he left $5,000 to Boston, $5,000 to Philadelphia. So 2 famous cities. Obviously, Philadelphia is the birthplace of the United States, and Boston, you know, pretty important. You got the Boston Harbor and Boston Tea Party. You know, and I don't know if Franklin was from Massachusetts or not. I can't remember. But anyway, so he left at time 0. Time 0, I don't know when that was, 1776, whenever that is. And what he said was, Boston and Philadelphia, you can't touch this money for 100 years. After 100 years, you can take out $500,000. And then at the end of 200 years, you can take out everything else. Now, how in the world did Benjamin Franklin know that they would have $500,000 after 100 years? Obviously, if this $5,000 only grows to $300,000, they can't take out $500,000. All right. So with quadratic formula, you can figure this out. I'm not. I'm gonna put a guess in what rate he was assuming. And I'm going to start with 4%. I not actually know what the right answer is, but I'm not going to tell you. So I'm going to assume it's 4%. So he's going to take $5,000 and he's going to invest it, the present value times 1 plus our rate raised to the n. Here our rate is 4% and our n is 100 years. We need that to equal some future value. So our present value is what? It's $5,000. So we're going to take $5,000 times 1 plus our 4% and raise it to 100 years. And what do we have? We only have $252,000. So that's not going to work. Let's say Ben Franklin was assuming a 6% return. In that case, we have plenty of money. And so then we withdraw $500,000, right? So how much do they have left at the end of 100 years? They have $1,196,000. At the end of 200 years, what happened? He said at the end of 200 years, they had $20 million left. All right, so let's see if we reinvested. So he invested $5,000. At the end of 100 years, if he invested it at 6%, they would have had $1,696,000. Now, obviously, Ben Franklin passed away, and somebody else was investing money. In fact, Ben Franklin probably had no control over the $5,000 once he donated. Some accountant or finance person took that money and invested it. Who knows what they bought with that, but they bought something. We're assuming Ben Franklin was assuming 6%, but we'll figure out what he was assuming. So here they're going to take the ending value at year 100 times 1 plus our I raised to 100 again. So here we'll take that 1,196,000 times 1 plus our rate, and we'll invest it for another 100 years, and that should give us $20 million. But it doesn't. It gives us $406 million. So Ben Franklin wasn't assuming a 6% return. So what was he assuming? So we should have $20 million at the end of that. So what rate was he assuming? So again, if you use the quadratic formula, you'll figure out the rate. And I've had students actually do that. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to cheat. Hopefully you've used this function before. I'm going to click on Data and do What If Analysis. And I'm going to do Goal Seek. We'll use the data table as well. We want this value at the end of 20 years. We want it to be exactly $20 million. By changing the rate. So I'll say OK, and we'll let Bill Gates do the work. And you can see that with a 5% return, now I don't know, it's possible Ben Franklin was assuming 6%, and he thought they'd have $400 million at the end of 200 years. But he might have been assuming a very round number like 5%. And so if they invested at 5%, at the end of 100 years, they would have earned $653,000. They would have taken $500,000 out, reinvested it, made 5% again. At the end of 20 years, they would have had $20 million withdrawal. Now, $20 million might not have been much money. This is back in 1991, so obviously he did this in 1791. You could go back to 1791 and see if 5% is something you could have made. You could have seen what the U.S. government was borrowing out, because they could have loaned the money to the U.S. government, which would have been a pretty shaky government at that time, obviously. That's only 3 years, 1781. That's only about a decade after the U.S. Constitution and we formed our government. But, you know, 5%, who knows what our interest rates would have been back. I actually can't find data back that far. You can go back to like 1871 in some places and see what interest rates were back. But they were probably about 5, 6, 7% back then, so it's probably a decent return. But pretty amazing, but just using the functions that we talked about here, we're using the future value function twice. And you come up with that, wow, he was assuming probably something around 5 to 6%, probably not much more than that. The next question is one related to Manhattan. And there's a story, and it's a really strange story, but they say that the indigenous people of the area, they sold Manhattan for what would be worth $24. Now, some people say, wow, how did the indigenous people, wow, what a bad decision to sell something for $24. I've read the story that actually the people that sold Manhattan actually didn't have any legal claims in Manhattan. So it's like, I'll sell you the Brooklyn Bridge for $1,000 and then you won't ever see me again. So, but the point he wants to make is $24, what would it be worth today? Now this is where I think he actually makes a mistake. So times 0, we've got $24. And so let's look at the rate. So the worst rate he wants to do is 5%. So he's saying this, and I think he gives us the number of years, 370 years, 78 years. So obviously today would be a different number. But the time is 378. We're doing this in years. So let's figure out the ending value. So remember, we've got the present value times 1 plus the rate raised to the time, very similar to what we did the first time. So you take $24 times 1 plus 5% raised to this 378, and what do you get? And here's where I think they definitely have an error here. He says that we're worth 2.4 trillion today. So here's hundreds, thousands, billions, trillions. So that's correct. He did that correctly. It's the next one he doesn't do correctly. He said, what if the rate had been 10%? If it had been 10%, he says that's $106 trillion. That's actually not $106 trillion. There's hundreds, thousands, millions, billions. There's trillions. It's actually $106 quadrillion. But the point he's making is that $24, and the last one he does, I think he does that one correctly. The last one he does is 1%. 1%, that would have only grown to 1,032. All right, so he only got this one wrong. That was the one he miscalculated. He got it off by a factor of 1,000. His point was at 5%, it would have been worth $2.4 trillion. It's hard to say what is Manhattan worth today, because you can't just go and look at Manhattan and say, oh, it's worth 7 trillion whatever dollars, because people poured a lot of money in to build all those buildings. So they were just getting the land, and they didn't have to put all that capital improvement into it. So I don't know if the land of Manhattan is worth 2.4 trillion. It's certainly worth less than 106 quadrillion dollars, and it's certainly worth a lot more than 1,000. So I don't know. This is very similar to the very first example I gave you. But I'm just showing you, these are all examples that you yourself can actually work, and they give you the answer. And I think this is the only error. So if you work the other examples, he gives you the examples, see if you can back into them. It's really good practice. It's good critical thinking practice. I'm not going to quiz you on it and make you have to do this, but I'm just encouraging you, go test yourself. See if you know this stuff, especially if you're finance or accounting, because you should be able to do this stuff in your sleep. In fact, you probably will be doing this stuff in your sleep. I remember in the 2008 crisis, I didn't sleep much, but the times I did sleep, boy, I was dreaming this stuff. I remember getting up one night in the middle of the night, and I worked out an entire option strategy I wanted to do the next day. I even got up and did it on an Excel spreadsheet and emailed it because I'd been dreaming about it. I got to work the next morning. I tried to replicate it, and I couldn't replicate what I did, and I discovered that what I did at 3 a.m. in the morning was more accurate than what I was trying to build when I got to work the next day. So I was pretty sharp. So once you get into this career, especially in stressful years like 2008, you'll be dreaming this stuff, and you need to know it so well. One thing I think is really important to the critical thinking is not that you just know how to do the math, but that you also you build an intuition, so you can start doing the math pretty quickly in your head, and you can pretty quickly guess the ballpark of what the value is, because you just get a natural feel for this. So there's a good article for you to get some practice and see what you know about finance. Can you actually do things outside of the typical textbook, kind of boring textbook? Everything's all set up for you. Take something that's not set up for you precisely, that in other people's terms, expressed in a different way, a different type of problem, and see if you can handle it. All right, so now what we want to do is we're going to change our focus now to cost-benefit analysis. And so today we'll see how far we get. I'm going to set this up. I might redo this entire thing again next class. Today I just want to set it up, or we may just not finish it this session, and we'll have to do it next session. So if you go into the Excel applications, your first cost-benefit problem is a real basic one. You've got 2 or 3 basic ones to work. They're fairly straightforward. So I want to work the first one. You work the next 2. What we're going to do with this is we're going to set this up, and then the next problem set is a much more complex cost-benefit analysis, a more real-life one, more like your projects. So the next one we do, and the next one, there's only one problem. So problem set 3. There's only one problem. I'm going to work the entire thing for you. So your goal is just to keep up with me and get everything built. And then when you build that, it's going to provide something that will be really useful for your team's cost-benefit project. So what we're going to do here is let's look at the data that we have. I'm going to expand everything to just a little bit larger text. Let's increase the column width here a little bit. You don't have to do all those things, but just to make it a little bit easier to deal with. Just a second. Let me set this up just a little bit better. Can't quite see it, but we're getting there. All right. So make sure you're using the exact same cells I am. That way you can more easily use the same formulas I'm using. So let's start off with our discount rate. You want to put that somewhere. We're going to see in the next problem, we're going to put it on our assumptions page. Here you can just put it up at the top. So the Brittany Corporation is trying to decide whether or not to implement this project. Their weighted average cost of capital is 7.5%. So 7.5%. Another assumption is their payback cutoff. So their cutoff is 3 years. We'll talk about that a little bit more. What she's saying there is, I want this project to be financially viable just after 3 years. If it takes 3.5 years or 4 years, that's too long. I don't trust it. So I want it to be 3 years. And the next thing we're going to do is set up our titles. So you're going to see we're going to be using these titles when we do problem set 3. We'll have a few more columns in this. But the first one we're going to have is time. And our time is going to be the dates. All right. So we're going to do something because we're going to use, bring this in. Sorry, I hate the way I have this set up. It just makes it so difficult to do anything with. Just a second. There we go. All right, that looks good. All right, so our dates. What we're going to do with the dates, this is really important. We're going to use something called the mid-year convention. And you'll understand that when we get into the notes. So right now, just trust me. What that says is she's got some cash flows going on here. But you notice the cash flows don't happen right at the end of the year. They're evenly distributed throughout the year. If we make our dates exactly time 0, time 1, time 2, time 3, then the formulas that we're going to use are going to assume those cash flows happen exactly at the end of the year. But they don't happen at the end of the year. They're evenly throughout the year. Well, we could set up every cash flow every single day. We could have one 365th cash flow on day 1, and then the next one 365th the second day. But boy, that'd be way too many calculations. So what we're going to do is, if it's evenly throughout the year, so if they say those terms, evenly distributed throughout year, and I may have some typos here. What are we going to do? We're just going to assume 100% of the cash flow happens at the midpoint of the year. So if it's year 1, let's assume to be time 0.5. Year 2 is assumed to be time 1.5. So the cash flows that happen evenly throughout year 1, let's say it's January 1st and we have cash flows happening throughout 2021, we're going to assume all of those cash flows happen right at June 30th. And that way we'll kind of get the same thing as them being spread throughout the year. Year 2, we'll assume all those cash flows happen June 30th, 2022, right at time 1.5. All right, so that's our mid-year convention. We'll see this in the notes. So what dates are we going to use? So we're going to start off with equal today, open close parentheses, and that'll just give us today's date. So I'm doing this on the 30th. You'll be doing it on a different day, but that's fine. So when's our next date? Well, our next date could be the previous date plus 365 days. But remember, we want to use the mid-year convention. So we're going to have some cash flow that happens today, so that's fine. But we want this second cash flow not to happen in 365 days, but 183 days, or 182. Either one is fine. I actually do it so that, well, it's not quite, yeah, let's do 183. So I'm going to do it so that, 183 is fine. 182 or 183 is fine. Either one is fine. All right, so that gives me that next year. And then the next year after that, there I can add 365. Because that puts it, there's time 0, there's time 0.5, 6 months away. There's time 1.5, that's 18 months away. And then I can copy that down. Now, when you get the leap year, for leap year, I actually incorporate leap year. You don't have to do this, but I would do it so you get the exact same answer I do. Now, you're going to maybe be slightly off, but if you use exactly my numbers, 183, 365, 365, and then leap year 366, then you'll get the exact same answer I have. I don't think we actually need this last year, because I don't think we have that many years, but you'll see this when we do the third problem set. So there's my years, there's my time. The next column, what we're going to do is cash flows. Now, when we do problem set 3, we may have 5 or 6 columns that we're going to combine to get one column to tell us our cash flows. But here, we're just going to have one column for cash flows. All right. What are our cash flows? Well, the project has an initial investment today of $580,000. So we're going to have a negative cash flow of $580,000. I recommend, if you're doing cash flows, that you use the dollar sign. All right. You'll see when we do problem set 3 that there are things that are going to be non-cash items that we're going to use. So we want to distinguish between the cash things are cash and things that are not cash. Then we have a $149,630 evenly throughout the first year. So there's evenly throughout a first year, $149,630. Again, it's in dollars. The next year, we have $250,000 throughout the second year, $250,000 throughout the second year. And then in the third year, we have $280,000 throughout the third year. And in this case, we don't need the fourth year. So we're good. All right, so we actually have almost everything we need. We can actually do the problem. So I'm going to set up 2 things. I'm going to set up what's called net present value, and I'm going to set up internal rate of return. And we'll talk about those in our next class. This class, I just want to set those up. We're also going to do discounted payback, but that one I will definitely have to wait till next class because that's the most complicated one. But on present value, internal rate of return, and discounted payback, those are ones that we can definitely set up today because they're pretty simple. So while I'm doing this, let me just set some things up over here. I want you to see what I'm typing, so in case. If I don't copy the next one down, if I don't have the next one down, that means you can just copy it. Just do Control-C, down arrow, and hit Enter. All right. These are just keyed numbers, so I don't need to give you formulas on that. All right, so here what we're going to do is we're actually going to let Bill Gates do the work for us. We're going to do net present value, but we're going to do net present value X. So it's X NPV. X NPV. And Bill Gates tells you what you need. You need the rate, where there's our rate right there. We need the values. There's the values right there. And we need the dates. There's the dates right there. Hit Enter, $sign, and there you have it. So let me put that formula over there so you can see it. All right, so we set that up. We'll do the same thing with the internal rate of return, equal XIRR. You need the values, you need the dates, and you really don't need the guess at all. So you just put that in there. This is a percent, so I'm going to change that to a percent. All right, so what we're going to learn is the accept or reject. On net present value, we accept it if the net present value is greater than 0, comma, we accept the project. If it's not, then we reject. And the actual rule is if it's greater than or equal, we accept. All right? So I'll put that formula over there on the side. All right, so we're going to see this rule, accept, reject. If net present value is 0 or greater, we accept the project, otherwise we reject it. That's what the if function does. The if says, if this first argument is true, give me this. If this first argument is false, give me the second thing. Same thing on internal rate of return, but internal rate of return, we say if the internal rate of return is greater than or equal to, here, it's greater than or equal to our discount rate, then we say accept, otherwise we reject. All right, so we'll talk more about this. We'll get back to the payback next class. So next class, we've just started this. So if you're not quite catching up with me, watch this. Make sure for the next class, you start the next video with this loaded and everything going. Sometimes when I do these dates off on the side, I'll do them and then I'll delete them the next video. So make sure you have this set up because we'll probably lose this the next video.